The cold, dark water of the San Francisco Bay served as the ultimate guard. For nearly 30 years, from 1934 to 1963, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary stood as the absolute maximum security symbol of American justice, a forbidding fortress designed not merely to contain, but to isolate the nation's most incorrigible criminals. Men like Al Capone and Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz. Located 125 miles offshore, surrounded by frigid currents reaching speeds of 6 to 8 knots, the rock was declared escape-proof. 36 men had attempted to break out over the years, and not a single one was known to have succeeded in reaching the mainland. Alcatraz was the end of the line. But on the morning of June 12, 1962, during the routine early morning bed check, the prison's myth was shattered. 3 convicts, Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, were discovered missing from their cells. It was a discovery made not through rigorous inspection, but through horrifying chance. As a guard performed the head count in cell block B, he reached through the bars of Frank Morris's cell to poke what appeared to be a sleeping figure under the blanket. The head, crudely sculpted and positioned on the pillow, rolled off the bed and struck the cold, concrete floor. The sound of the falling object was immediately recognized as wrong. It was a papier-mâché sculpture, complete with paint and real human hair, resting on the pillow to fool the periodic night patrols. The decoy had sustained a broken nose on impact. This small incident, the mere action of a guard nudging a blanket, revealed a systemic failure born of institutional arrogance. The prison's long-held reputation for invincibility led to a complacency among the guards who relied on quick, routine inspections. The inmates had calculated correctly that the guards would perform a cursory visual check rather than a meticulous physical search. The fact that the entire operation was discovered only when a simulated head broke after a casual nudge underscores a profound truth. The only pathway to escaping Alcatraz was not brute force against the walls, but calculated deception and the exploitation of predictable human error. The sight of the broken plaster head signaled that the prison's most sophisticated minds had successfully used its own routine against it. The mastermind behind this audacious plan was Frank Lee Morris, inmate number AZ4441, who arrived at Alcatraz in January 1960. Morris was unique in the prison system, credited by officials as possessing superior intelligence and a lifetime criminal record that started at the age of 13. He was a professional inhabitant of the correctional system who earned his transfer to the Rock because he was, quite simply, an escape artist, compiling an impressive resume of prior breakouts, including one from a Louisiana prison in 1955. Morris was known for his cold, meticulous approach, viewing the prison system as a series of engineering problems to be solved. Joining Morris were the Anglin brothers, John, AZ 1476, and Clarence, AZ 1485. Convicted of bank robbery, the brothers were sent to Alcatraz after their own sequence of attempted escapes from other federal facilities, including a notorious, though failed, attempt to ship John out of Leavenworth inside a bread box. John arrived in October 1960, and Clarence followed in early 1961. All 3 men knew each other from previous incarceration at the Federal Penitentiary in Atlanta. Their assignment to adjoining cells within Cell Block B was a fatal administrative error by the prison staff, granting them the ideal proximity for communication and coordination. A 4th inmate, Alan West, AZ 1335, a known escape risk who arrived in 1957 for car theft and previous escape attempts, also joined the conspiratorial group. The long and intricate planning phase began in December 1961. The escape depended entirely on locating and exploiting the central architectural vulnerability of the high-security cell block. The walls of Cell Block B, while appearing solid, contained a seldom-used, unguarded utility corridor that ran directly behind the cells. This area was a blind spot in the prison's security architecture. The conspirators realized that if they could access this corridor, they could move freely behind the metal veneer of the cells, unseen by the passing guards on the main walkway. The great challenge was penetrating the exterior of their cells, specifically the ventilation grates located beneath the sinks. These grates measured approximately 9 by 14 inches. The existence of the corridor itself was not the inmates' discovery. Rather, it was the proximity of seasoned escape artists assigned to adjacent cells who recognized and acted upon this specific flaw. The prison's design emphasized robust exterior containment but overlooked the internal utility network, allowing the men to weaponize an essential yet forgotten part of the building's infrastructure. The physical work of boring through the damp, soft concrete surrounding the ventilation grates began immediately. The men spent months loosening the air vents by painstakingly drilling closely spaced holes around the cover. Their tools were masterpieces of improvised engineering. Sharpened spoon handles stolen from the mess hall were used for scraping and digging, and a homemade drill was fashioned from the motor of a broken vacuum cleaner. To mute the telltale sound of the drilling, Morris and his team encased the vacuum motor in housing. They used the noise of the nightly prison music hour to mask the sounds of their activities. Once through the opening, which they covered with whatever was at hand, a suitcase or a piece of cardboard, they entered the utility corridor. From there, they climbed the piping to the roof of the cell block inside the building. This area, unnoticed by the guards below, became their secret, temporary workshop. They worked in shifts over the next 6 months, using a crude periscope they had constructed to watch for guards and alert them to approaching head counts. The true triumph of this phase was not the breach of the wall, but the sustainable hidden factory they established, necessary for manufacturing their escape gear. The scale of the items produced demonstrated extraordinary ingenuity and planning. To create a vessel capable of crossing the treacherous waters of the bay, they gathered over 50 stolen olive green rubberized raincoats. These raincoats were stitched together to form a 14-foot by 6-foot pontoon-style inflatable raft, along with several individual life preservers. The waterproof seams were vulcanized and sealed using a sophisticated, albeit crude, form of heat sealing. Investigators later recovered a critical detail: a bottle of Rem-Weld book repair liquid plastic, which the men may have used as a waterproofing adhesive. Paddles were made from scrap wood and screws. To inflate the large, cumbersome raft, they stole a concertina, removed the keys, and repurposed its bellows. This meticulous preparation, involving practical chemistry and advanced resource management, showed the escape was driven by necessity and the brilliant, practical engineering mind of Morris. The most critical element of the deception, which afforded them the necessary working time, were the dummy heads. Crafted from a papier-mâché mixture of soap, toothpaste, concrete dust, and toilet paper, they were given realistic features using paint and actual human hair collected from the barbershop floor. These silent sentinels were positioned in the bunks, allowing the men to spend hours in their clandestine workshop above. On the night of Monday, June 11, 1962, the plan was put into action. At approximately 9:30 p.m., Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers slipped through their prepared holes and into the corridor, gathering their gear. The escape was immediately complicated by Alan West's failure. West, who had been an integral part of the fabrication team, had not managed to completely remove his ventilator grill in time. He desperately struggled to widen the hole, but the others, bound by a strict timeline dictated by the bay's powerful outgoing tide, could not wait. West was left behind, finding only an unfinished pontoon, his own fake dummy head, and an extra partially finished raft. He eventually climbed back into his cell, exhausted, becoming the sole source of information for the subsequent investigation. West's failure introduced a profound uncertainty into the mission. The 3 remaining escapees had a meticulously planned schedule, and being forced to abandon a colleague meant their subsequent movements were likely rushed and unplanned. This unexpected delay transformed the remaining journey, increasing the existential risk as they rushed to meet the critical tidal window necessary for survival. The detailed construction required an array of stolen and improvised materials. The extent of this, unclear. With West abandoned, Morris and the Anglin brothers continued their high-stakes maneuver. From the utility corridor, they climbed the plumbing piping to the top of their cell block roof, moving inside the building. They then lifted themselves through a large ventilation shaft onto the main roof of the cell house. Once outside, the most precarious part of the journey began, a vertical descent. They shimmied approximately 50 feet down the back of the prison using a large exterior pipe connected to the bakery smokestack. After reaching the ground, they cut through the heavy barbed wire atop the perimeter fencing and scrambled down a steep embankment to the northeast shore, the closest point to their intended launch site. Around 10 p.m., investigators estimate, the three men launched their fragile, raincoat-constructed raft into the dark, unforgiving waters of the San Francisco Bay. The ultimate antagonist in this story was the bay itself. On the night of June 11, 1962, the water temperature was a lethal 54 degrees Fahrenheit. In such frigid conditions, severe hypothermia sets in rapidly, quickly leading to muscle incapacitation and a high probability of death. Moreover, the bay is notorious for its powerful currents, which run between 6 and 8 knots. For decades, the FBI's official conclusion relied on these environmental factors, asserting that the men likely drowned and were swept out into the Pacific Ocean. The conventional wisdom held that survival was an impossibility, but forensic science provided a critical counterargument years later. Dutch scientists, using sophisticated hydraulic software and historical tidal charts, modeled the currents of San Francisco Bay for that specific night. The hydraulic model revealed a stunning fact. The inmates could have survived if they launched during a narrow 30-minute window between 11:30 p.m. and 12 a.m. Launching during this specific period would have allowed the outgoing tide to carry them toward Angel Island, their planned intermediate destination, and then onward toward the Marin County mainland. Launching at 10 p.m., the time estimated by investigators, and potentially rushed due to West's delay, would have inevitably swept them directly out to sea. The true suspense of the escape rests entirely on whether Morris, the genius planner, chose to wait the crucial hour and a half for the perfect tide shift, or if the pressure of the moment forced him into a fatal, premature launch. The intensive search following the discovery yielded ambiguous results. Authorities recovered fragments of the rubberized raft, a homemade life vest, and a plywood paddle on or near Angel Island, suggesting they had reached at least that far. However, no bodies were ever recovered in the bay, though they could easily have been swept out to sea. The FBI pursued hundreds of leads across nearly 2 decades, ultimately concluding in 1979 that the 3 inmates likely drowned in the cold waters. Yet the lack of conclusive physical evidence meant the case remained an enduring piece of American folklore, fueling numerous theories. The U.S. Marshals Service, which took over the case in 1979, has never officially closed the file, and Morris and the Anglin brothers remain on its wanted list. For law enforcement, the lack of definitive proof of death means the 3 men are still officially considered fugitives. The entire narrative of the case was drastically recontextualized in 2013 when a piece of new evidence surfaced, a letter sent to the San Francisco Police Department's Richmond station. The letter claimed to be written by John Anglin. The text was chilling and direct. "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I'm 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely." The letter claimed Frank Morris died in 2008 and Clarence Anglin died 3 years later, around 2011. The writer stated that he had lived in Seattle, North Dakota, and currently resided in Southern California. The most incredible detail was the offer to surrender. "If you announce on TV that I will be promised to first go to jail for no more than a year and get medical attention, I will write back to let you know exactly where I am. This is no joke." The letter, irrespective of its authentication status, was credible enough to force the FBI to reopen the iconic cold case. This alleged correspondence fundamentally shifted the historical understanding of the escape. If authentic, it meant the escape was not a tragedy that ended in the bay, but a profound triumph of criminal ingenuity, followed by 50 years of successful evasion. The request for medical care and a short, guaranteed sentence speaks volumes about the psychological toll of a life spent in absolute isolation, prioritizing a final measure of dignity and peace over perpetual freedom. It challenges the US Justice Department's entire narrative of the Rock and suggests that the three ghosts of Alcatraz might have survived long enough to tell their own tale. The 1962 escape from Alcatraz remains America's most enduring prison mystery, perfectly embodying the conflict between human determination and seemingly impossible odds. The forensic evidence clearly demonstrates that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers possessed the planning, technical skills, and audacity to overcome the structural security of the federal penitentiary. The engineering of their tools, the crafting of the decoys, and the fabrication of their pontoon raft stand as testament to their remarkable ingenuity. However, the ultimate question of their fate hinges on a single critical variable: the 30-minute tidal window established by modern scientific modeling. The scientific analysis contradicts the historical premise of inevitable drowning, lending unexpected credence to the claims of survival. Coupled with the chilling, unverified 2013 letter, the case transforms from an unsolved maritime disaster into an active, ongoing manhunt for fugitives who may have successfully lived out their lives on the margins of society. The question remains: did Morris, the methodical planner, wait the crucial hour and a half, or did the three escapees disappear into the cold, silent history of the bay? For over 60 years, law enforcement has insisted that the cold, powerful bay claimed Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers. Yet the evidence we have reviewed, the scientific proof of a survival window, and the eerie claim in the 2013 letter tells a different story. These men were experts in deception and timing. Did they hit that narrow tidal window? Did the ghosts of Alcatraz walk free, only to finally surrender to age and illness 5 decades later? Or did the Rock, as intended, hold its prisoners forever? Tell us what you think in the comments below. If you want more deep dives into history's darkest, most silent mysteries, hit the like button and subscribe to The Dark Silent for our next investigation.